Hi, everybody. This is Allison from Cat Creations. How are you? Please don't forget to hit that like button, share, subscribe if you haven't done so already. And if you get anything from my work, a connect the dot, an epiphany, a mind explosion, a new book to read, a new author to explore, artwork to create, please consider supporting my work. All the links are in the bottom of the video in the link section. Talking about artwork. Have to Mod Podge that. If you are interested in any of my creations or want to view my portfolio, please check out Allylattkreations211.com, where you can see a plethora of artwork and creations that I make. And if you're interested in purchasing, I do it privately, so please email me. Channel memberships. It's at a 3D only level right now, and it's a really good way to support my channel. The bonuses to becoming a perks, bonuses, fun things. As members, you get channel member only videos, which could be rants, which could be oracle cards, um, private paint and sips, stuff of that nature. So check that out. And also, once a month, I do a raffle on my channel on a Friday Night Live. So if anybody is interested in the work that I do, I give a lot of fun things away. Really, I do. I had already a pyramid and a paint and sip painting. Someone got to choose which one they wanted. And each member gets a free entry into any and all of my giveaways or raffles. So please check that out. Today I'm going to hopefully finish the Secret Doctrine. Hopefully. Not the book, the section, the stanza 9. Um, I have my voice back. Everything seems to be in working order. Sorry, this is going out late tonight. I had to walk to work today because it started to snow rapidly and intensively, which the roads and my car doesn't make a mix at all. So I got home late because I had to walk. So that also entails making sure that I'm okay. Yeah, fun times. And that is a linty ball hanging in the air if you're watching. The invention of magic, a strange term to use as though the unveiling of the eternal and actual mysteries of nature could be invented, as well attributed millenniums hence. The invention instead of the discovery of radiant matter to Professor Crookes. Hermes was not the inventor or even the discoverer, for as said in the footnote, thought Hermes is a generic name, as is Enochian, the inner spiritual eye, Nebu, the prophet and seer. It is not the proper name of any one living man, but a generic title of many adepts. Their connection is symbolic allegories, with the serpent is due to their enlightenment by the solar and planetary gods during the earliest intellectual race, the third. They are all the representative patrions of the secret wisdom. Asclepios is the son of the sun Apollo, sun god Apollo, and he is Mercury. Nebu is the son of Bel Merodach Vevestava Manu. The great Rishi is the son of Vivistavat, however you say that name. The sun Arsira, Sura. And while astronomically the Nagas, along with the Rishis and the Grandharvas, As Apsara, whatever those names are, the minor gods, and devas are the sun's attendants throughout the 12 solar months in theogony and also in anthropological evolution. They are gods and men. When incarnated in the neither world, let the reader be reminded in this connection of the fact that Apollonius met in Kushmir Buddhist Nagas, well, which are neither serpents zoologically nor yet the Nagas ethologically, but wise men. The Bible from Genesis to Revelations is but a series of historical records of the great struggle between white and black magic, between the adepts of the right and the prophets, and those of the left, the Levites, the clergy of the brutal masses, even the students of occultism, though some of them have more archaic MSS and direct teaching is rely upon, find it difficult to draw a line of demarcation between the Soladas and the right path and those of the left. The great schism that arose between the sons of the fourth race as soon as the first temples and halls of initiation have been erected under the guidance of the halls of intuition and halls of initiation had been erected under the guidance of the sons of God, is allegorized in the sons of Jacob. That there were two schools of magic, and that the Orthodox Levites did not belong to the Holy One, is shown in the words pronounced by the dying Jacob. And here it may be well to quote a few sentences from Isis Unveiled. The dying Jacob thus describes his son, Dan, he says, shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path, that biteth the horse heels, so that his rider shall fall backwards. He will teach candidates black magic. I have waited for the salvation, O Lord. O Simeon and Levi, the patriarch remarks that they are brethren. Instruments of cruelty are in their habitations. O my soul, came not thou into their secret, unto their assembly. Now, in the original, the words their secret really are their sod. And sod was a name for the great mysteries of Baal, Adonis, and Bacchus, who are all sun gods and had serpents for symbols. The Kabbalists explained the allegory of the fiery serpents by saying that this was the name given to the tribe of Levi, to all the Levites, in short, and that Moses was the chief of the Soldals, however you say that. It is the mysteries that the original meaning of the dragon slayers has to be traced and questioned and fully treated and hereafter. Meanwhile, it follows that if Moses was the chief of the mysteries, he was the hierophant thereof, and further, if at the same time we find the prophets thundering against the aberrations of the people of Israel, that there were two schools, fiery serpents was then simply the epithet given to the Levites of the priestly caste after they have departed from the good law, the traditional teachings of Moses, and to all those who followed black magic. Isaiah, when referring to the rebellious, sorry, I can't get that out, children who will have to carry their riches into the land whence come the viper and fiery flying serpent, a Chaldea in Egypt, whose initiates had already greatly degenerated in his day, 700 BC, meant the sorcerers of those lands. But these must be carefully distinguished from the fiery dragons of wisdom and the sons of the fire mist. In the great book of the mysteries, we are told that 7 lords created 7 men. 3 lords, Dihan, Kohans, or Pitras, were holy and good, 4 less heavenly, and 4 a passion. The Shayas, phantoms of the fathers, were as they. This accounts for the differences in human nature, which is divided into 7 graduations of good and evil. There were 7 tabernacles ready to be inhabited by monads under 7 different karmic conditions. The commentaries explain on this basis the easy spread of evil as soon as the human forms had become real men. Some ancient philosophers ignored the 7 in their genetical accounts and gave only 4. Thus, the Mexican local Genesis has 4 good men described as the 4 real ancestors of the human race, who were neither begotten by the gods nor born of women, but whose creation was underwrought by the creative powers, and who were made only after 3 attempts of manufacturing men had failed. The Egyptians had in their theology only 4 sons of God, whereas in Primander 7 are given, thus avoiding any mention of the evil nature of man, though when Seth from a god sank into Set Typhon, he began to be called the 7th son, whence probably arose the belief that the 7 sons of the 7th son is always a natural born magician, though at first only a sorcerer was meant. Apap, the serpent symbolizing evil, is slain by Aker, Set's serpent. Therefore, Set Typhon cannot be that evil. In the Book of the Dead, it is commanded that chapter, I don't know what that is in Roman numerals, sorry. I want to say that might be no idea. Should be read in the presence of a serpent on 2 legs, which means a high initiate, a hierophant, for the discus and ram's horns that adorn his serpent's head in the hieroglyphics of the title of the said chapter denoted this. Over the serpent are represented the 2 mystic eyes of Amun, the hidden mystery god. The passage corroborates our assertion and shows that the word serpent meant in antiquity. But as to the Nagols and the Nargols, whence came the similarity of names between the Indian Nagas and the American Nagols? The Nagol was a Chaldean and Assyrian chief of the Magi, Rab Maj, and the Nagol was the chief sorcerer of Mexican Indians. Both derived their names from the Nagol Caesar, don't know how to pronounce that, the Assyrian god and the Hindu Nagas. Both have the same faculties and power to have an attendant demon with whom they identify themselves completely. The Chaldean and Assyrian Nagol kept his demon in the shape of some animal considered sacred inside the temple. The Indian Nagol keeps his wherever he can in the neighboring lake or wood, or in the house in the shape of some household animal. Such similarity cannot be attributed to coincidence. A new world is discovered, and we find that for our forefathers of the 4th race, it was already an old one. That Arjuna, Krishna's companion, and Sheila is said to have descended into Patala, the antipods, and therein married something with a U, Naga, or Nagini, rather, the daughter of the king of the Nagas. And now it may be hoped the full meaning of the serpent emblem is proven. It is neither that of evil nor less of all that the devil, but is indeed the eternal son Abraxas, and the central son, spiritual son of all the Kabbalists represent in some diagrams be the circle of Tiphereth. And here again, we may quote from our earlier volumes and enter into further explanations. So, wow, that's a download. Sorry, guys. From this region of unfathomable depth, Bythos, Adadi, Shinkda, and the veil of the unknown issues forth a circle formed of spirals. This is Tefereth, however you pronounce that, which in the language of symbolism means a grand cycle. composed of smaller ones. Coiled within so as to follow the spirals lies a serpent, emblem of wisdom and eternity, the dual androgyny, the cycle representing Enoa, or the divine mind, a power which does not create but which must assimilate, and the serpent, the Agathiodan, or Ophis, the shadow of the light, not eternal, yet the greatest divine light on our planes. Both were the logi of the Orphites, or the unity as logos, manifesting itself as double principle of good and evil. Were it light alone, inactive and absolute, the human mind could not appreciate nor even realize it. Shadow is that which enables light to manifest itself and gives it objective reality. Therefore, shadow is not evil, but is the necessary and indispensable corollary which completes light or good. It is its creator on earth. According to the views of the Gnostics, these two principles are immutable light and shadow, good and evil being virtually one and having existed through all eternity, as they will ever continue to exist, so long as they are manifested worlds. This symbol accounts for the adoration by this sect of the serpent as a savior coiled either around the sacramental loaf or a tau, the phallic emblem, as unity and Noah and Orpheus are the logos. When separated, one is the tree of life, spiritual, the other the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Therefore, we find Orpheus urging the first human couple, the material production of Ida Baoth, but which owed its spiritual principle to Sophia Akhmoth, to eat of the forbidden fruit, although Orpheus represents divine wisdom. Interesting. The serpent, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life are all symbols transplanted from the soil of India. The Araza Mariam, the banyan tree, so sacred with the Hindus, since Vishnu, during one of his incarnations, repurposed under its mighty shade and there taught human philosophy and sciences, is called the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. Under the protecting foliage of this king of the forest, the gurus teach their pupils their first lessons on immortality and initiate them into the mysteries of life and death. The Java Elam of the Sacerdotal College are said in the Chaldean tradition to have taught the sons of man to become like one of them. To the present day, don't know, I am not tackling that, who lives in his Pho Menu or temple of Buddha on the top of the Queen Long Sang. Again, guys, there's words I can't project physically. The great mountain produces his greatest religious miracles under a tree called Chinese Sun Ming Shu, or the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. For ignorance is death, and knowledge alone gives immortality. This marvelous display takes place every 3 years when an immense concourse of Chinese Buddhists assembles in pilgrimage at the holy place. Now it may become comprehensible why the earliest initiates and adepts, or the wise men, for whom it is claimed they were initiated into the mysteries of nature by the universal mind represented by the highest angels, were named the serpents of wisdom and dragons, as also how the first physiologically complete couples, after being initiated into the mystery of human creation through Orpheus, the manifesto logos and the androgyny, by eating of the fruit of knowledge, gradually began to be accused by the material spirit of prosperity of having committed sin, of having disobeyed the Lord God, and having been tempted by the serpent. So little have the first Christians who despoiled the Jews of their Bible understood the first 4 chapters of Genesis and their esoteric meaning. that they never perceived that only was no sin intended in this disobedience, but that actually the serpent was the Lord God himself, who, as Orpheus the Logos, or the bearer of divine creative wisdom, taught mankind to become creators in their turn. They never realized that the cross was an evolution from the tree and the serpent, and thus became the salvation of mankind. By this, it would become the very first fundamental symbol of creative cause, applying to geometry, to numbers, to astronomy, to measure, and to animal reproduction. According to the Kabbalah, the curse on man came with the formation of woman. The circle was separated from its diameter line, from the possession of the double principle in one, that is the androgyny condition. The separation of the dual principle was made, presenting two opposites whose destiny it was forever after to seek reunion into the original one condition. The curse was the viz, that nature impelling the search invaded the desire result by the production of a new being, distinct from the reunion or oneness desired, by which the natural longing to recover a lost state was and is forever being cheated. It is by this tantalizing process of a continued curse that nature lives. The allegory of Adam being driven away from the tree of life means esoterically that the newly separated race abused and dragged the mystery of life down into the region of animalism and bestiality. For as the Zohar shows, that Shikna, the wife of Metatron, symbolically is the way to the great tree of life, the mighty tree. The Shikna is divine grace. As explained, this tree reaches the heavenly veil and is hidden between three mountains, the upper triad of principles in man. From these three mountains, the tree ascends above the adept's knowledge, aspires heavenward, and then rescends below into the adept's ego on earth. This tree is revealed in the daytime and it is hidden during the night, revealed to an enlightened mind and hidden to ignorance, which is night. The tree of knowledge of the good and the evil grows from the roots of the tree of life. But then also in the Kabbalah, it is plainly to be found that the tree of life was the instated cross in its sexual aspect, and that the tree of knowledge was the separation and coming together again to fulfill the fatal condition. To display this in numbers, the values of the letters composing the word OTZ, tree, are 7 and 9. 7 being the holy feminine number, and the 9, the number of the phallic or male energy. The end-stated cross is a symbol of the Egyptian female male, Isis Osiris, the germinal principle in all forms based on the primal manifestations applicable in all directions and in all senses. This is the Kabbalistic view of the Western occultists, and it differs from the more philosophical Eastern or Aryan views upon this subject. The variation of the sexes was in the program of nature and natural evolution, and the creative faculty in male and female was a gift of divine wisdom. In the truth of such traditions, the whole of antiquity, from patrician philosopher to the humblest spiritually inclined plebeian, has believed. And as we proceed, we may successfully show that the relative truth of such legends, if not their absolute exactness, vouched for by such giants of intellect as were Solon, Pythagoras, Plato, and others, beings to draw upon more than one modern scientist. He is perplexed, he stands startled and confused before proofs that are being daily accumulated before him. He feels that there is no way of solving the many historical problems that stare him in the face unless he begins by accepting ancient traditions. Therefore, in saying that we believe absolutely in ancient records and universal legends, we need hardly plead guilty before the impartial observer, for other and far more learned writers among those who belong to the modern scientific school evidently believe in much that the occultists do. In dragons, not only symbolically, but also in their actual existence at one time. It would have indeed been a bold step for anyone, some 30 years ago, to have thought of treating the public to a collection of stories ordinarily reputed fabulous, and of claiming for them the consideration due to genuine realities, or to have advocated tales believed in to be time-honored fictions as actual facts, and those of the nursery as being, in many instances, legends, more or less distorted, descriptive of real beings or events. Nowadays, it is a less hazardous proceeding. Thus opens the introduction to recent 1886 and most interesting work by Mr. Charles Gould called Mythical Monsters. He boldly states his belief in most of these monsters. He submits that many of the so-called mythical animals, which throughout long ages and in all nations have been fertile subjects of fiction and fable, came legitimately within the scope of plain matter-of-fact natural history, and that they may be considered not as the outcome of exuberant fancy, but as creatures which really once existed, and of which unfortunately only imperfected and inaccurate descriptions have filtered down to us, probably very much refracted through the mists of time. Traditions of creatures once coexisting with man, some of which are so weird and terrible as to appear at first sight to be impossible. For me, the major part of those creatures are not chimeras, but objects of rational study. The dragon, in place of being a creature, evolved out of the imagination of an Aryan man by the contemplation of lightning flashing through the caverns, which he tenanted, as is held by some mythologists, is an animal which once lived and dragged its ponderous coils, perhaps flew. To me, the specific existence of the unicorn seems not incredible, and in fact more probable than that theory which assigns its origin to a lunar myth. For my part, I doubt the general derivation of myths from the contemplation of the visible workings of external nature. It seems to me easier to suppose that the palsy of time has enfeebled the utterance of these often told tales under their original appearance is almost unrecognizable. Then the uncultured savages should possess powers of imagination and poetical invention far beyond those enjoyed by the most instructed nations of the present day. Less hard to believe that these wonderful stories of gods and demigods, of giants and dwarves, of dragons and monsters, of all descriptions are transformations, than to believe them to be inventions. It is shown by some geologists that man, successfully traced to periods variously estimated from 30,000 to 1 million years, coexisted with animals, which have long since become extinct. These animals, weird and terrible, were, to give a few instances, of the genus Seidates, whose huge bone and vertebrates show them to have attained a length of nearly 200 feet. The remains of such monsters, no less than 10 in number, were seen in Professor Marsh in the something terraces of Colorado, strewn upon the plains. The Titanosaurus, Montius, reaching 50 or 60 feet in length. The dinosaurians in the Jurassic beds of the Rocky Mountains, of still more gigantic proportions. The Allantosaurus imminens, however you pronounce these words, a femur of which alone is over 6 feet in length, and which would be thus over 100 feet in length. But even yet the line has not been reached, and we hear of the discovery of remains of such titanic proportions as to possess a thigh bone over 12 feet in length. Then we read of the monstrous Civatherium in the Himalayas, the four-horned stag, a large as an elephant and exceeding the latter in height, of the gigantic Megatherium of colossal flying lizards, Pterodactyli, with crocodile jaws as a duck's head. All these weird coexistent with men, most probably attacked men as men attacked them. And we are asked to believe that the said men were no larger than he is now. It is possible to conceive that, surrounded in nature with such monstrous creatures, man, unless himself a colossal giant, could have survived, while all his foes have perished. It is that his stone hatchet, that he had the best of a Civatherium, or a gigantic flying Surian. Let us always bear in mind that at least one great man of science, De Quatrefages, sees no good scientific reasons why man should have not been contemporaneously with the earliest mammalia and go back as far as the secondary period. It appears, writes the very conservative Professor Jukes, that the flying dragons of romance had something like a real existence in former ages of the world. Does the written history of man, the author goes on to ask, comprising a few thousand years, embrace the whole course of his intelligent existence? Or have we, in the long mythical eras, extending over hundreds of thousands of years, and recorded in chronologies of Chaldea and China, shadowy mementos, a prehistoric man, handed down by tradition and perhaps transported by a few survivors to existing lands from others which, like the fabled Atlantis of Plato, may have been submerged or the scene of some great catastrophe which destroyed them with all their civilization. Potentially. The few remaining giant animals, such as elephants themselves, smaller than their ancestors, the mastodons and hippopotami, are the only surviving relics and tend to disappear more entirely with every day. Even they had already had a few pioneers of their future genius and have decreased in size in the same proportion as man did. For the remains of a pygmy elephant were found in the caves deposits of Malta, and the same author asserts that they are associated with the remains of pygmy hippopotami, the former being only 2 feet 6 inches high, or the still existing hippopotamus, which M. Milne Edwards figures a little more than 2 feet in height. Skeptics may smile and denounce our work as full of nonsense or fairy tales, but by so doing, they only justify the wisdom of the Chinese philosopher Shang, who said that the things that men do not know can in no way be compared, numerically speaking, to the things that are unknown, and thus they laugh only at their own ignorance. The sons of God and the sacred island. The legend given in Isis in relation to a portion of the globe, which science can now concede to have been the cradle of humanity, though it is but one of the 7 cradles in truth, rang, condensed, and now explained as follows. Tradition says, and the records of the great book, the Book of Dzyan, explain that long before the days of Adam and his inquisitive wife, Heva, are found but salt lakes and desolate barren deserts. There was a vast inland sea, which extended over the Middle Asia, north of the proud Himalayan range, and its western prolongation. An island which, for its unparalleled beauty, had no rival in the world, was inhabited by the last remnant of the race which preceded ours. The last remnant meant the sons of will and yoga, who, with a few tribes, survived the great cataclysm. For it is the third race which inhabited the great Lemurian continent that preceded the venerable and complete human race, the fourth and the fifth. Therefore, it was that said in Isis, this race could live with equal ease in water, air, or fire, for it had an unlimited control over the elements. These were the sons of God, not those who saw the daughters of man, but the real Elohim, though in the Oriental Kabbalah they have another name. It was they who imparted nature's most weird secrets to men and revealed to them the infallible and now lost world. The island, according to belief, exists in the present hour, now as an oasis surrounded by the dreadful wilderness of the great desert, the Gobi, whose sands no foot hath crossed in the memory of man. This word, which is no word, have traveled once around the globe and still lingers as far off dying echo in the hearts of some privileged men. The hierophants of all the sacerdotal colleges were aware of the existence of this island, but the word was known only to the Java Alim, or chief lord of every college, and was passed to his successor only at the moment of death. There were many such colleges, and the old classic authors speak of them. There was no communication with the fair island by sea, but subterranean passages known only to the chiefs communicated within it all directions. Traditions assert, and archaeology accepts the truth of the legend, that there is more than one city now flourishing in India, which is built on several other cities, making thus a subterranean city of 6 or 7 stories high. Delhi is one of them. Allahabad is another. Examples of this being found even in Europe. In Florence, which is built on several defunct Etruscan and other cities, why then could not Ellora, Elephanta, Kari, and Ajanta have been built on subterranean labyrinths and passages as claimed? Of course, we do not allude to the caves which are known to every European, whether de visu or through hearsay, notwithstanding their enormous antiquity, though that is so disputed by modern archaeology. But it is a fact known to the initiated Brahmins of India, and especially to yogis, that there is not a cave temple in the country but has its subterranean passages running in every direction, and that those underground caves and endless corridors have in their turn their caves and corridors. Who could tell that the lost Atlantis, which is also mentioned in the secret book, but again under another name pronounced in the sacred language, did not exist in those days? That's a good question. We went on to ask, it did exist most assuredly, as it was fast approaching its greatest days of glory and civilization when the last of the Lemurian continents were down. The great lost continent might have perhaps been situated south of Asia, extending from India to Tasmania. If the hypothesis, now so much doubted and positively denied by some learned authors who regard it as a joke of Plato's, is even verified, then perhaps will the scientists believe that the description of the God-inhabited continent was not altogether a fable, and they may then perceive that Plato's guarded hints and his attributing the narrative to Solon and the Egyptian priests were but a prudent way of imparting the fact to the world, and by cleverly combining truth and fiction, so disconnecting himself from a story which the obligations imposed and initiation forbade him to divulge. To continue the tradition, we have to add that the class of hierophants was divided into 2 distinct categories: those who were instructed by the sons of God of the island and who were initiated in the divine doctrine of pure revelation, and others who inhabited the lost Atlantis, if such must be its name, and who, being under another race, born sexually but of divine parents, were born with a sight which embraced all living things and was independent of both distance and material obstacle. In short, they were the 4th race of men mentioned in the Popol Vuh, whose sight was unlimited and who knew all things at once. In other words, they were the Lemuro Atlanteans, the first who had a dynasty of spirit kings, not of manes or ghosts, as some believe, but of actual living devas or demigods of angels again, who had assumed bodies to rule over them, and who in their turn instructed them in the arts and sciences. Only as they were rupa, or material spirits, these Dhyanis were not always good. Their king, the Vata, was one of the latter and is under the evil influence of this king demon that the Atlantis race became a nation of wicked magicians. In consequence of this, war was declared, the story of which would be too long to narrate. Its substance may be found in the disfigured allegories of the race of Cain, the giants, and that of Noah and his righteous family. The conflict came to an end by the submersion of Atlantis, which finds its imitation in the stories of the Babylonian and Mosaic flood. The giants and magicians and all flesh died, and every man, all except Zithorus and Noah, who are substantially identical with the great father of a very big word in the Popol Vuh, or the Sacred Book of the Guatemalans, which also tells of his escaping in a large boat like the Hindu Noah. If we believe the tradition at all, we have to credit the further story that from intermarrying of the progeny of the Hierophants of the island and the descendants of the Atlantean Noah sprang up a mixed race of righteous and wicked. On the one side, the world had its Enochs, Moses, various Buddhas, its numerous saviors, and great Hierophants. On the other hand, its natural magicians who, through lack of the restraining power of proper and spiritual enlightenment, perverted their gifts to evil purposes. We may supplement this by the testimony of some records and traditions. In the History des Verges, the author says, once, holy crap, I can't see. One of the most ancient legends of India, preserved in the temples by oral and written tradition, relates that several 100,000 years ago, there existed in the Pacific Ocean an immense continent which was destroyed by geological upheaval and fragments of which must be sought in Madagascar, Ceylon, Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and the principal isles of Polynesia. The high plateau of Hindustan and Asia, according to its hypothesis, would only have been represented in those distinct epochs by great island continuous to central continent. According to the Brahmins, this country had attained a high civilization, and the peninsula of Hindustan, enlarged by the displacement of the waters of the time of the great cataclysm, has but continued the chain of the primitive traditions born in this place. These traditions give the name of Rutas, to the people which inhabited the immense whatever that word is, continent that I can't project, sorry. From their speech was derived the Sanskrit, and the Indo-Hellenic tradition, preserved by the most intelligent population, which immigrated from plains of India, equally relates the existence of a continent and a people to which it gives the name Atlantis and Atlantes, and which it locates in the Atlantic in the northern portion of the tropics. Apart from this, the supposition of an ancient continent in those latitudes, the vestiges of which may be found in the volcanic island and mountainous surface of the Azores, the Canaries, and the Cape de Verdes, is not devoid of geographical probability. The Greeks, who, moreover, never dared to pass beyond the Pillars of Hercules on account of their dread of the mysterious ocean, appeared too late in antiquity for these stories, preserved by Plato, to be anything else than an echo of the Indian legend. Moreover, when we cast a look on the planisphere, at the sight of the islands and islets strewn from the Malayan archipelago to Polynesia, from the Straits of Sunda to Easter Island, it is impossible upon the hypothesis of continents preceding those which we inhabit not to place there the most important of all. A religious belief common to Malacca and Polynesia, that is to say, to the two opposite extremes of the oceanic world, affirms that all these islands were formed two immense countries inhabited by yellow men and black men, always at war, and that the gods wearied with their quarrels, having charged ocean to pacify them. The latter swallowed up the two continents, and since it has been impossible to make him give up his captives, alone the mountain peaks and high plateaus escaped the flood by the power of the gods, who perceived too late the mistake they had committed. Whatever they may be in these traditions, and whatever may have been the place where a civilization more ancient than of Rome or of Greece, of Egypt, and of India was developed, it is certain that the civilization did exist, and it is highly important to science to recover its traces, however feeble, fugitive they may be. The last tradition corroborates the one given from the records of the Secret Doctrine. The war mentioned between the yellow and the black men relates to a struggle between the sons of God and the sons of giants, or the inhabitants of magicians of Atlantis. The final conclusion of the author, who personally visited all the islands of Polynesia and devoted years to the study of the religion, language, and traditions of nearly all the peoples, is as follows. As the Polynesian continent, which disappeared at the time of the final geological cataclysms, its existence rests on such proofs that, to be logical, we can doubt no longer. The three summits of the continent, the Sandwich Islands, New Zealand, Easter Island, are distinct from each other from 15 to 1800 leagues, and the groups of intermediate islands, Veti, Samoa, Tonga, and others, are themselves distant from the extreme points from even 700 or 800 to 1,000 leagues. All navigators agree in saying that the extreme and central groups could never have communicated in view of their actual geographical position, and with the insufficient means they had at hand, it is physically impossible to cross such distances in a pigru without a compass and travel months without provisions. On the other hand, the Aborigines of Sandwich Islands, of Veti, of New Zealand, of the central groups of Samoa, Tahiti, had never known each other, had never heard of each other before the arrival of the Europeans, and yet each of these people maintained that their island had at one time formed part of an immense stretch of land that extended towards the west of the side of Asia. And all brought together were found to speak the same language, to have same usages, the same customs, the same religious beliefs, all to question, where is the cradle of your race, the sole purpose, the sole response? Extend their hand toward the setting sun. Geographically, this description clashes slightly with the facts in the secret records, but it shows the existence of such traditions, and this is all one cares for. For as there is no smoke without fire, so a tradition must be based on some approximate truth. In its proper place, we will show modern science fully corroborating the above in traditions of the secret doctrine with regard to two lost continents. The Easter Island relics are, for instance, the most astounding and eloquent memorials of the primitive giants. They are as grand as they are mysterious, and one has but to examine the heads of the colossal statues that have remained unbroken on the island to recognize to them, at a glance, the features of the type and character attributed to the fourth race of giants. They seem one cast through different in features, that of a distinctly sensual type, such as the Atlanteans, are represented to have in the esoteric Hindu books. Compare these with the faces of some other colossal statues in Central Asia, those near Bamin, for instance, the portrait statues, sorry guys, tradition tells us of Buddhas belonging to the previous Manvaradas, of those Buddhas and heroes who are mentioned in the Buddhist and Hindu works as men of fabulous size. The good and holy brothers of their wicked co-uterine brothers, generally as Ravana, and the giant king of Lanka was the brother of Kumbh, whatever. Kumbh is the first. All descendants of the gods through the rishis, and thus, like Titan and his enormous brood, all heaven's firstborn. These Buddhas, though often spoiled by the symbolical representation of the great pendant ears, show a suggestive difference perceived at a glance between the expression of their faces and that of Easter Isle statues. There may be one race, but the former are sons of God, the later the brood of mighty sorcerers. All these are reincarnations, however, and apart from unavoidable exaggerations of popular fancy and tradition, they are historical characters. When did they live? How long ago lived the two races, the third and fourth? And how long after did the various tribes of the fifth race bring their strife, the wars between good and evil? We are assured by the Orientalists the chronology is both hopelessly mixed and absurdly exaggerated in the Puranas and other Hindu scriptures. We feel quite prepared to agree with the accusations. Yet if Aryan writers did allow their chronological pendulum to swing too far one way occasionally beyond the legitimate limit of fact, nevertheless, when the distance of that deviation is compared with the distance of the Orientalist deviation in the opposite direction, moderation will be found on the Brahmanical side. It is the pundit whose will, in the long run, be found more truthful and nearer to the fact that the Sanskritists. Surely it is not because the curtailing of the latter, even when proven to have been restored to in order to fit a personal hobby, is regarded by Western public opinion as a cautious acceptance of facts, whereas the pundit is brutally treated in print as a liar, that everyone has to see this in the same light. An impartial observer may judge it otherwise. He may either proclaim both unscrupulously historians or justify both, each of his respective ground, and say, Hindu Aryans wrote for their initiates who read truth between the lines, not for the masses. If they did mix up events and confuse ages intentionally, it was not in view of deceiving anyone, but to preserve their knowledge for the prying eye of the foreigner. Otherwise, to him who can count the generations from the Manus and the series of incarnations specified in the cases of some heroes, the meaning and chronological order are very clear in Puranas, as for the Western Orientalist. He must be excused on the account of his undeniable ignorance of the methods used by archaic esotericism. But such existing prejudices will have to give way and disappear very soon before the light of new discoveries. Already Dr. Weber's and Dr. Max Mueller's favorite theories, namely that writing was not known in India even in the days of Panini, that the Hindus had all their arts and sciences, even to the zodiac and their architecture, from the Macedonian Greeks. These and other such cock and bull hypothesis are threatened by ruin. It is the ghost of old Chaldea that comes to the rescue of truth. In his third Hibbert lecture, Professor Sayce of Oxford, speaking of newly discovered Assyrian and Babylonian cylinders, referred at length to Ea, the god of wisdom, now identified with the Onis and Berosus, the half-man, half-fish, who taught the Babylonians culture and the art of writing. Thus, Onis to whom, thanks only to the biblical deluge, an antiquity of hardly 1500 BC, had been hereto allowed, is now spoken of in these terms. His city was Eridu, which stood 6,000 years old on the shores of the Persian Gulf. The name means the good city, a particularly holy spot, since it was the center from which the earliest Chaldean civilization made its way to the north. As a culture god was represented as coming from the sea, it was possible that the culture of which Eridu was the seat was a foreign importation. We now know that there was an intercourse at a very early period between Chaldea and the Sinaitic Peninsula, as well as India. The statues discovered by the French at Tel Allah, dating from at least BC 4000, were made of extremely hard stone known as idorite, and the inscriptions on them stated that diorite to have been brought from Mazian, the Sinaitic Peninsula, which was then ruled by the pharaohs. The statues were known to resemble the general style of the diorite statue of Kefren, the builder of the second pyramid, which, according to Mr. Petrie, the unit of measurement marked on the plan of the city, which one of the Tel Allah figures holds on his lap, is the same as the employed by the pyramid builders. Teak wood has been found at Megir or of the Chaldees, although that wood is an Indian-specific product. Add to this that an ancient Babylonian listing of clothing mentions Sindhu or muslins, explained as vegetable cloth. Muslin, best known now as Dhaka muslin, known in Chaldea as Hindu Sindhu, and teak wood used 4,000 years BC, and yet the Hindus to whom Chaldea owes its civilization, as well proven by colonial something Van Kennedy, were ignorant of the art of writing before the Greeks taught them their alphabet, if we have to believe Orientalists. And stanza 9, finally, stanza 10, the history of the fourth race. So sorry about all of that. I do have kids with walking pneumonia, flus, colds, and all kinds of crazy shit going around in my school. And I'm just trying to battle my sinuses. Fun times. Sending each and every one of you love, light, compassion, grace, shielding, and protective energy. Please go within. Be the shoulder. Be the lighthouse. State your truths. Don't forget to hit that like button. Thank you for tolerating that. And I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching. Have a blessed and beautiful day. Bye for now.